It's springtime, 1986. I'm walking around the grass field outside the Dublin Firehouse during their annual flea market. One of my favorite times to pick up cool toys and also sell stuff I wasn't interested in anymore. And down at the end of the row of tables, I see the GIJoe APC, Amphibious Personnel Carrier. And I start hustling towards it. I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna buy this thing because it's super cool. And out of the corner of my eye, I see somebody else coming. And so I start running faster, and this other person slides in on their knees and scoops it up in front of me. And it's my cousin Rick. Welcome to Pegwarmers. I'm Kevin, and I'm here to talk about toys. Today I'm sharing some childhood memories about GIJoe and my cousin Rick. So Rick scooped up the APC, and it was dirt cheap because that's the way toys were back then. He probably paid $1 or $2 for it, which was cool because then I still got to play with it when we got to hang out. And I did get one eventually. I don't remember if his had seatbelts. My current one in my collection still doesn't have the seatbelts. But it had, the tabs for taking the canvas off. It had the little turret gun. I think the steering wheel and, obviously the windscreen area. But it was really cool because you could hold a ton of guys in it. And it was just also a nice, army truck kind of vehicle. And this was in an era where there weren't a ton of, tanks, right? In early GIJoe, you had the Mobat and the Mauler, but they were, more expensive battery-operated things that we didn't have. You had some small stuff like the Armadillo, and I guess the Slugger, too. But this big army truck just kind of had, that realistic army vibe. It hold a lot more troops than the Vamp. So it's great that my cousin Rick picked that up. My cousin Rick was a few years older than me, but he was my family member closest in age to me that I played GIJoes with. I had friends that I played GIJoes with all the time. But I'm from a pretty large family. My mom's one of 7. I was grandchild 19 out of 20. I had first cousins that were, able to babysit me when I was little. And there weren't a lot of kids around my age. So Rick, like I said, was a few years older than me. He was into GIJoe. And so whenever we got together, that's what we did. We played with GIJoes. He always brought his Joes in a little tackle box that you could open up, and he had the little guys in the bottom. And I don't remember every figure he had. I know Rick had the Crimson Twins. I know he had Footloose. He had a little PVC Black Bear figurine that we pretended was Footloose's pet. I always really liked the characters that had pets, like Mutton Junkyard and Spirit and Freedom. So Footloose having this little bear cub figurine as a pet was pretty cool. I also very vividly remember Rick having a bunch of pickup sticks in his box one time. Do you guys remember the game Pickup Sticks? You'd get this little plastic tube that had a whole bunch of oversized toothpicks, 8-inch long toothpicks. And you'd hold them all together like spaghetti, and then you'd let go of it, and it would form a pile, and you had to try and pull them out one at a time. I don't even know if that's a game they make anymore. But I remember playing a lot as a kid, and we used to pretend those were Lady J's spears, because she came with that goofy-looking spear gun thing that didn't seem like the cartoon at all. So we would often have her throw the pickup stick spears, and we would pretend the different colored sticks had to do with which, trick arrow it was, like a net arrow or a grappling hook arrow, or, all the stuff that we would see on the cartoon. My cousin's birthday was on Christmas Day, and he always got shortchanged. People would get him one gift for both things. And my mom tried to always make sure that we got him 2 presents, so that way he specifically got something for his birthday and something for Christmas. And I guess it was 1987, Christmas of 87, most likely, because it would have been a whole nother year later in 88 otherwise, but we picked out Law and Order, gotta love the pets, and Outback for him. And, we went to the store, and I didn't get either one of those figures for Christmas, because my mom tried to avoid, me having all the exact same figures as my friends. It happened sometimes, people had the same figures, but it was truly fun to have, a bigger cast of characters when you had 2 people's collections together. So, Rick got Law and Order and Outback, and I did not get them new for Christmas that year. But I remember him having those figures and being really excited to get 2 separate presents for his birthday and Christmas. I had the G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero computer game for the Apple IIe. There's a lot of images online of the Commodore 64 version. The graphics are a little different on that Apple IIe version, but I had that game. You'd pop the disc in, it would have you, like, learn about your mission. You could play 2 different modes. There was a vehicle mode where you would pick a vehicle to fly or drive. There was the Mobat, the Vamp, the Dragonfly, and the Sky Striker on that side. And you'd have to fly around and try and blow up Cobra bases, and it was very difficult. The other side was more like an early Street Fighter. You would pick it would show you which Cobra you were going up against, and then you would pick your Joe. And then it would say, flip the disc. It would have a picture of Duke saluting you, and you'd take the disc out, flip it over, put it back in. It would play the battle between you and the other characters. If the computer had picked to play as Zartan, Zartan would pick one of the Joes to play as, so you couldn't necessarily match your weapon up against one of those guys super perfectly, because Zartan would have a random weapon. There were a whole bunch of different maps that you could play on. There was like a kind of a westerny desert town. There was the Terradrome, like a computer console room, like a street, like a New York street alley kind of thing. And there were always hazards in them, like a Fang would fly by and drop a bomb, or a Skyhawk would fly by and drop a bomb, or there would be, something on the ground that could hurt you. So you were avoiding hazards in the level and also fighting the bad guy, and you could shoot across the screen at them and move around with the joystick. And oftentimes, when I first started out, if I got a win, it was because I lucked out and the hazards of the environment had gotten the bad guy, like they got hit by one of the bombs or something like that, because I wasn't very good. But Rick was fantastic at it. He was older, so he was better at, doing the joystick stuff and playing the game. And I remember he had won so many of these character-on-character matches that eventually it started randomly letting guys out of jail. So at the end, when you'd beat the people, it would show like the Joe base from the cartoon, the big base with the giant cannon, and then it would go back to the screen for the you'd have to flip the disc, and you'd go back to the screen where it would show you who it was going to play as, and you would pick your character, and it would put little jail bar cells over the characters' faces, and eventually, there's only like 1 or 2 Cobras left, and then suddenly, some of the bars would start disappearing, and I didn't know that because I had never been in a situation where I had beaten, multiple Cobra guys to that point, like, almost all of them. And we learned this was like a never-ending game. Somebody always escapes, which is very comic booky, there's always somebody getting out of Arkham Asylum for Batman to fight. But I was super impressed by Rick's skills. Eventually I did get much better at it and had a lot of fun. I don't know whether the airplane stuff and the vehicle stuff would be easier, like, now looking back on it and having a lot more experience with video games, but those levels were much harder. You had to drive around and look for the bases, and they were shooting at you. The aircraft both had inverted controls, which would often goof me up, where I would want to fly forward and accidentally just nosedive into the ground, because you got to pull up to go. It just was a different set of skills than I necessarily had. I'm talking, 1985, 1986. I'm 4 or 5, very young when these things were going on. I don't remember the exact circumstances. I think Rick had stayed overnight. For some reason, I was getting to pick out a G.I. Joe at the store, like at Kmart or something like that. I don't know if I had saved up allowance or I'd earned some sort of reward from, like, passing spelling tests at school or something like that. We're in the store. There's a lot of 86 and 87 Joes on the pegs. And I am looking at Raptor very seriously because I wanted the little Raptor bird. Because I think I must have lost Freedom at that point. And I was like, oh, well, I could give this to Spirit to be Freedom. And, and then have a Cobra guy. And Rick is, like, trying to talk me into getting the 86 Roadblock. Like, look at the size of his gun. Oh, this is amazing. And I didn't have a Roadblock at the time. Roadblock was a very popular cartoon character. I don't think the 87 movie had come out yet. And I picked Raptor because I wanted that bird. And and I would have the bird play the good guy bird and the bad guy bird from time to time. And, I used Raptor. I always had more Joes than Cobras. It was just sort of the way I collected as a kid. I think people tended to just buy you the good guy, you get random figures for your birthday or whatever. I don't think it was necessarily that I was always picking out good guys at the store, but maybe. But also a huge part of my GI Joe collection just was yard sale buys. I would get new figures for my birthday and Christmas, but in between I would get stuff from the flea markets. So in some ways, you have less control over who you get. I mean, I guess you have just as much say when you're picking it out of the flea market as you do at the store. People often talk about, like, if you had a time machine, what would you do? And this is my moment of, like, it wouldn't really change the course of my life. It wouldn't really change the course of history. Even if it was, like, I couldn't go back and actually change anything, but could, like, revisit it, just kind of watch what happens. Again, silly moment, and, it probably should be, like, go and see my grandmother, There was a GIJoe yard sale advertised in the newspaper. We had this thing called the Penny Power, this little free newspaper that would come in the mail, and it was classifieds. It's a great way to find out about flea markets, way before Marketplace and Craigslist and stuff. And there was an ad for a GIJoe yard sale on a Sunday, and my mom asked my aunt if it would be okay if Rick came with us after church to go to this GIJoe yard sale. And, my aunt gave Rick a couple bucks, and we went to Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which is kind of a upscale area from, where we live. A lot of doctors and lawyers is, kind of always the joke about Doylestown. And we went to this house, and it was two brothers and, like, their neighbor selling off all their G.I. Joes. They were a little bit older than us. They just didn't, they got out of it. My sister was there, too. My mom told my sister she could pick something out if she wanted to. My sister got the mail-away Sergeant Slaughter with the USA shirt, the exact version of that Sergeant Slaughter in my collection. My G.I. Joe collection is my sister's Sergeant Slaughter from that yard sale. She really didn't play with it that much. She was a Barbie person, and it hung out with her toys a lot, and she sometimes would pretend it was like a little kid for Barbies, but, he had a mustache, and she was very anti guys with mustaches posing as kids for her Barbies. She would borrow Ripcord from me sometimes. Ripcord, the Halo Jumper, he doesn't have any facial hair, and he has no, like, grenades or guns strapped on him. He is wearing camouflage, but he has no, like, guns and knives strapped to him. So he was her preferred kid for her Barbie universe, so she was borrowing a G.I. Joe from me. But she had Sarge. I don't know who Rick picked out that day. Like, it's a blur, and this is why I'm saying it would be fun to, like, I can't affect anything, but I just go back and see the event again to see what all was there. I don't really know who all Rick picked out, but I know my mom gave him a few more bucks to buy a few more things, because she, this was, like, such a great opportunity. The stuff was very cheap. I remember buying some accessory pack weapons for a penny a piece. So I picked up some accessories to arm up some of my yard sale guys. I got Shipwreck, which I was very excited for. I missed him. I missed 85. Like, I got into G.I. Joe in 86, but knew a lot of the earlier characters from the cartoon show. Like, I saw the cartoon show before I had any of the toys. So I got Shipwreck, and I got the Devilfish. I got the Crimson Twins. I got Gung Ho. All of them complete. Like, they were bagged up with their file cards, with their accessories. I didn't get the Skyhook with the twins, but I had both of their guns. Shipwreck had Polly. He had the pistol with the loop on it. He had the boarding hooks. Pretty much complete. And I was really tempted to get Zartan and the Swamp Skier, but they had the flag. They had the USS flag. It was in its box, sitting by their garage. I swear the asking price was $20. My mom swears it was higher than that, but maybe like $30 or $40. And I wanted it real bad. And I kept asking for it, and my mom was like, well, we'll talk to your dad about it. I don't know where we would put it, blah, blah, blah. And she kept asking me, is there anything else you want? Like, she was trying to encourage me to get more figures, because there were so many figures there. It was just like 2 or 3 long tables just full of Joes, and lots of ones that I didn't have. And I was trying to be on my best behavior and not, like, ask for a ton of stuff, because I thought there was no way I would get the flag if I picked out that stuff. But I didn't know that there was no way I was getting the flag. Like, My mom saying she was going to talk to my dad was really just her getting out of me, like, crying and whining about it. So I didn't pick out a ton of stuff. I did get... There was probably at least something else I got, but those are the things I vividly remember getting. We went home, and I never got the flag. Even if my mom had bought it for that price and stuck it in the attic, never even let me touch it, it would have been a huge financial windfall down the road. But I didn't. Years later, when I finally bought a flag, my mom... I had it partially set up in my parents' basement, as I still lived with them as an adult, before while I was saving up to buy my house. And my mom came downstairs one time and looked at it, and she goes, well, we really should have bought that one for you at that yard sale. And I was like, yeah, even if I didn't get to play with it, or even if we set it up like this, I had the main deck plate and the tower set up, but I didn't have, like, the extension, so it was much shorter. Even if that was all I had set up as a kid, it would have been okay. But my parents' basement had a bar in it. It was like a wood panel kind of situation. There was a bar in the back, and my parents didn't drink, and the basement was our playroom. Really, my friends and I would, like, set stuff up on top there, like little scenes, or we would pretend that was the Death Star and play on the ground for all the ground attacks. And the shelving on the backside of the bar was where I stored a lot of my toys, like on different shelves. There were little small, like, drawer-type shelves at the top, and we kept, like, arts and craftsy stuff in those, and then there were big, wide shelves down towards the bottom. We had some games on them and some other stuff. That was one of the coolest, like, childhood, like, moments to revisit that is not family-related, I guess. And so, obviously, like I said, I sound like a terrible person being like, I would go back to the moment where I could see all those G.I. Joes again. One other funny moment that I have related to yard sales, and I don't think my cousin Rick is associated with this one, but it's possible because it's again that Dublin Firehouse Flea Market, and Rick was always at that. It was right down the street from the church we went to, and my family was just involved in things that happened in that town. I had like $1 left to spend, and this guy had a whole bunch of figures, and they were $1 a piece, and I'm looking at Lift Ticket, and I'm looking at Zartan. Now, Zartan doesn't have his pads on, right? Or I don't think he does. Or maybe he has the chest one on. I don't really recall. But I'm going back and forth thinking, I'm never going to get the Tomahawk. It's too big. But I really want Zartan because he's like an awesome character from the cartoon. And I picked Lift Ticket. And of course, I got the Tomahawk. It is my all-time favorite G.I. Joe vehicle. Why did I get the Tomahawk? My dad is a helicopter mechanic. It's also why I kind of wanted Lift Ticket. So... then later on in life, I had 2 Lift Tickets, and I never had a Zartan until I was an adult collector. So that the flag and picking Lift Ticket over Zartan are 2 of my biggest like kid yard sale G.I. Joe regrets. On the day I'm filming this, we're getting together with some of the family for a little family get-together thing we do. I don't know if my cousin Rick will be there. Probably his brother Tim will be there. But that's kind of what got me thinking about some of these stories. I needed something fairly quick to shoot, and I know you guys enjoy some of those childhood memory things. I wish I could think of other stuff specifically related to G.I. Joe and my cousin Rick. Big plot points. I do remember one time using Castle Grayskull as the base for Cobra with him, and having some of the guys up on like the ramparts and the Cobra guys inside, and that was always fun. Like reusing playsets. I didn't like the scale creep with like He-Man and G.I. Joe. That didn't really work for me. But like Star Wars characters could work with G.I. Joes, and Grayskull, even though the chair's too big, really, you could kind of pretend the throne is enormous, right? That kind of silly stuff. Recently, my brother-in-law's been flipping a lot of stuff, buying stuff at yard sales and selling them online. Things like vintage board games, some action figure stuff, even like collectible glassware and stuff. He just goes and hunts and sees what he thinks he can make a margin on, and he's not really doing it seriously. Like, he's not like trying to get rich. It's not his core income, but a little side fun hustle. And so occasionally he'll ask me some questions, send me some pictures. What do you think about this kind of thing or whatever? And here and there, within the stuff that he's buying, he's been like giving me some little things as like a thank you for weighing in on some of these options and being like, no, that's not worth investing in or whatever. That's too much. The first thing that he pulled out for me were these 2 Kenner Ghostbuster ghosts. These little guys came packed in the ectoplasm cups of the slime that they would sell for Ghostbusters. And I don't have either one of these guys, and so I'm super excited to have them. Little pink and little blue monster dudes. Then one day he sent me a picture of this. He said, I'm putting this in your pile for you. Does it have a marking on it? And he flipped it over. He sent me a picture of the bottom, and it says 1985 Hasbro Bradley Inc., Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And I was like, oh, it's a G.I. Joe thing. I didn't recognize it at first. This is the little bunker wall that goes to the Cobra rifle range. And a lot of those Battlefield accessory sets I've never owned, or if I own them, they're like sealed in the box. And I haven't really looked at all the parts. It's sort of an area of the G.I. Joe collection that I never worried about too much. There's people that are like know all the little rifles and which colors they come in for all that stuff. And I've just never put a ton of time into like memorizing all that stuff. So anyway, he pulled this out and set it aside for me. So that's cool. A little rifle range wall. He gave me a G.I. Joe coloring book. One of the few I don't have. You saw, if you watched last week's episode about the Carlisle Toy Show, you saw I just picked up a G.I. Joe coloring book. I knew this one was coming my way that day, so there was no chance of me buying a double. This one mentions on the back, Undersea Mission, Secret of Starfish Island, the Solaris Project, and the Cobra Shrinking Ray. And I think now I have all 4 of those, between 2 I had from my childhood and then the 2 most recent ones. This one does have some stuff colored in it, but it's pretty nicely done, and I don't really mind books that are colored in, especially if they're not just scribbled. So this one has, some of the artwork colored in, but it's in relatively good shape, so I'm excited to have it in my collection. And one of the other things that I think is really funny about it, well, I remember coloring some stuff in this coloring book years ago. Like, a friend of mine had this coloring book, and because some of the pages are very familiar. But in the back, there's 2 sheets of paper tucked in here. Lined paper. One, it looks like they traced one of the images and colored it in from the coloring book. And the other one has this, very Freddy Krueger looking guy drawn in it. There's no name on any of these papers or anything like that. And I wouldn't even know how to begin to find the person whose, yard sale stuff this was. But I'm going to keep those pages tucked in the back because I think it's pretty funny. The last thing he passed on to me was a plushie Ninja Turtle with suction cups on his hands and feet. I mentioned I didn't really remember these guys having the suction cups. I remember kids having these like a little bit bigger size. So anyway, now I got suction cup Mikey. I don't know how to display him well because he needs to go on like the inside of a window. I guess I could put him inside a display case stuck to the door. I'll probably not worry about actually trying to use the suction cups. But he's super cool, and glad to have him in my collection. I have other childhood memories of playing with some of my friends and some storylines and things that we used to do, or little gimmicks when we would play. Let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. Do you like that kind of thing? I don't have a ton of photos, to go along with a lot of this stuff. I haven't edited this yet as I'm recording it, so I don't know how much like B-roll-y kind of images I can find to splice in. But, give me some feedback on this type of episode, because I'm always looking for ideas of other ways I can spice things up, other types of content that people would enjoy. We've got a cool episode coming up at the beginning of September, filmed with Ryan and Tony from Hack the Movies, filmed at the video store. So stay tuned for that one. And I think next week, no promises, it could change. This stuff does happen sometimes. But I'm thinking about doing a modern toy unboxing. I have several things I'm very excited about that are new to the collection here that I'd love to open up and, do a quickie reviews of several figures. So that's kind of what I have brainstormed so far for next week. Do me a favor, hit the like button, share this video with a toy collecting friend. Consider subscribing to the channel or joining the Patreon if you want to support the channel further. Thanks for hanging on the peg with me.